Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe, and we've got another great episode for you today. We're going to continue our 2026 NFL season preview, going division by division. First two episodes cover the NFC East and the AFC East. Today, we're going to move back over to the NFC, talk about the NFC North, probably the best division in football. And we're going to go in order of how the division standings ended up last year, which means we're going to start off with the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears, who shocked everyone a year ago in Ben Johnson's first season as the head coach, won, as I said, the most competitive, probably the best division in football. And it happened primarily because of what Johnson was able to do with the offense. Now, we all know his credentials. We all know Ben Johnson was a tremendous offensive coordinator, play caller, designer with the Detroit Lions. He's tremendous at using formation, personnel, creating space in the passing game, creating space in the red zone. He's always been very good at that. But what a lot of people didn't focus on, or probably don't know that much about, is his run game. It's a versatile run game. It's a well-conceived run game. And he's been effective with it everywhere he's called plays. And that was as big of a reason for the Bears' success as anything else last year, was the transformation of their run game. They were not a good running team the year before. And then last year, they ended up with the third-ranked rushing attack in the NFL. They were efficient and explosive. They led the NFL in percentage of runs gaining at least 4 yards, which is a good barometer of how constantly are you having a successful run. And then they were third in the league in 10-yard runs, so that tells you a little bit about their explosiveness. So a lot of that was scheme. A lot of that was Caleb Williams scrambling around, but they picked up a lot of yards on the ground, and that was really the foundation of their offense. And this was the thing coming into year two for Caleb Williams. He needed help around him. He didn't have many friends the year before. Yes, he had a good receiving core, but we had a lot come out last offseason about the nature of the offense behind the scenes, which did not paint a very good picture about what was going on in the Bears building. So it was important that in year two with Ben Johnson, he would get a lot of help. And he certainly did from the scheme. Johnson helped create an advantage for Caleb Williams based on his use of personnel and formation. The Bears used 12 personnel, so 2 tight ends, at the 6th highest rate in the NFL. They used 13 personnel, which is 3 tight ends, at the 5th highest rate. And what that did was it got the defense to play a lot of single high. Generally, again, it's a little more complicated than this, but just to simplify things, against run formations, running situations, when the defense is anticipating that the offense is going to run the ball, they'll tend to bring down an extra defender in the box. I know a lot of the two-shell, Vic Fangio-style defenses, they don't necessarily do that, but across the board, running formations, big formations, can induce the defense into playing single high, getting an extra man in the box, and in those situations, it is easier to throw against. It's a little more predictable to throw against. You can utilize play action, and that's kind of what happened last year with the Bears. They saw the 3rd highest rate of single high coverage, against which they had a lot of success. They had the 2nd highest frequency of play action passes. Johnson did a great job of helping Caleb Williams out. Now, all that being said, the offense, and particularly the passing game, it still needs a lot of work. Caleb Williams, he got away with a lot by what he was able to do outside of structure. Making plays with his legs, scrambles. At the end of games, he was tremendous in the final 2 minutes of games. The Bears had 7 fourth-quarter come-from-behind wins that came in the final 2 minutes, which was a record. They almost had an 8th one against the Rams in the divisional round. But that covered up a lot of the warts with the passing game. And really the biggest thing with that passing game is that they just need more consistency. They need more of Caleb Williams hitting his back foot, getting the ball out, taking what the defense is going to give him, being a little bit more of a boring quarterback. He took some major strides last year, but that's sort of the next step he needs to be consistent between all those spectacular plays where he's running around and making things happen and making those Tecmo Super Bowl-like throws where he's dropping back 40 yards like he did against the Rams at the end of regulation and then hitting someone in the corner of the end zone. You're not going to get away with that doing that so often. But he was tremendous in that regard. But I think that's one of the biggest questions with the Bears going into 2026 is, who are they really? Yes, they won the division as an 11-6 team last year, but as I said, they had all those last-minute come-from-behind wins. They were just as close to being 6-11 as they were 11-6. So was what we saw just a mirage? Was it just a flash in the pan, one good season where they got away with a lot of things and a lot of things worked out for them? Now, I don't want to take away from their ability to win late in games. I think that's more of a skill than a fluke. That's something that teams can do consistently. So it's not enough to just say, oh, well, they pulled out a bunch of close games and this year that won't happen. Because, again, it is a skill to be able to do that. However, if you're living that way as frequently as the Bears were last year, which was just about every week, all it takes is one batted pass at the line or one throw where you're just an inch or two off target. And all of a sudden, instead of being an 11-6 division winner, you're 9-8. And in that division where there's not a lot of margin for error, you're at the bottom of the division and you're on the outside looking in come playoff time. So that'd be one of the questions with the Bears this year, because they played that way on the defensive side of the ball too. This was not a very good defense. They got away with a lot because they were able to generate turnovers. They led the league in takeaways, which, again, I'm not going to say that that's a fluke because there are certain things you do on defense that can consistently generate turnovers. But there is a little bit of luck involved there. Again, batted passes at the line, things like that. And you can't necessarily predict from one year to the next that you're going to have the same level of success when it comes to generating turnovers. And that's the problem for the Bears, because when they didn't generate turnovers last year on defense, they weren't great. They were bottom 10 in the league in points allowed, bottom 5 in yards allowed. They actually were not a very good defense overall. They were saved by a lot of those takeaways. So looking forward to this year, what questions do we have about the defense? I think the first thing is that I'm still not impressed by their pass rush. They were just 22nd in the league last year in pressure percentage and sacks. Most of that came from Montez Sweat, but outside of him, there wasn't much. And the Bears didn't really do a ton to address this area. So I don't know what difference we're going to see this year in terms of them being able to get to the quarterback. They also have a new-look secondary. Moved on from safeties Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They did replace them with a very good safety in the draft in Dylan Thieneman, 25th overall pick. But it's still a major unknown as far as how good they'll be in the secondary. Maybe they're aided this year by the fact that their cornerback room, if they can stay healthier, will be better this year. Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon were sort of meant to be two of their key corners last season, and they both just dealt with a ton of injuries right from the start of the year. That kind of kept them off the field or ineffective when they did play. With those two guys back this year, maybe you see a little bit more success on the back end. You know, one thing about Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, is that he didn't stop playing man coverage just because his secondary was banged up. Played the 7th highest rate in the NFL. So that might explain why they were somewhat ineffective on defense outside of generating takeaways. But if he wanted to play man when his secondary was banged up, I see no reason why he won't try to do the same thing this year. And again, it's just a matter of, are they going to be a healthier and therefore a better secondary this year? That's the thing we just don't know. The one more interesting thing to point out about the Bears, I'll go back to the offensive side of the ball. As I said, they spent a lot of time using 12 personnel last year because they have two really good tight ends. They had Colson Loveland, who they took in the first round last year. They have Cole Kmet. But despite having two really good tight ends on the roster already, the Bears used a third-round pick on tight end Sam Roush. Now, when you take a player in the third round, that's not a player that you expect to not be on the roster. That's a player that you expect to be playing relatively soon. So it's interesting that they went out and selected Sam Roush, who is a massive human being, 6'6", 270 pounds as a tight end, because it makes me think, with all that success that we saw Sean McVay and the Rams have with those 13 personnel groupings, 3 tight end sets, that's something that's going to catch fire around the league, and certain competitive coaches like Ben Johnson, who, if you didn't think he was competitive, just see how he treated Matt LaFleur in their 3 games against the Packers last year. It's hard for me to believe that he's not looking at what Sean McVay did last year and saying to himself, I can do that better. And that's exactly what that move was to get Sam Roush. He's going to be more of the inline tight end. They'll feature him more in the run game. We'll spread Kmet and Loveland out a little bit more. But I expect to see a big jump in 13 personnel usage for the Bears. And when you throw in the fact that they traded away DJ Moore, you're going to see an offense that's skewed more in the direction of going through their tight end room than their wide receiver room. You'll see more 12 personnel sets, 13 personnel sets, where only 1 or 2 receivers are on the field. So that'll be something to watch. He's a mad scientist as an offensive play designer and play caller, and it's going to be fun watching to see what he does with his second year with Caleb Williams and in his second year with this Bears offense. All right, let's move over to the Green Bay Packers. And if you're a Packers fan, that 2025 season was the most frustrating thing on ever, wasn't it? You trade for Micah Parsons pretty much right before the start of the season. That instantly jumps your odds to becoming one of the Super Bowl favorites. You go on to have a very good season with your defense top 5 or 6 in points and yards allowed. You get to week 15. You're playing the Denver Broncos, the eventual AFC number 1 seed in Denver, and you've got a 2-possession lead early in the third quarter. You've got a 9-3-1 record, control over the NFC North because you just beat the Bears the week before. It was hard at that point in the season to not be looking at it and say, this team is about to go on a run to the Super Bowl. By the end of that quarter in Denver, that end of that third quarter in Denver, Micah Parsons was down with an injury that would keep him out the rest of the year, and any hopes of a Super Bowl run pretty much ended with that because the Packers would go on to lose that game. They'd lose their next 3 games to end the regular season 9-7-1, limping into the playoffs, and then, of course, they lost that playoff game in Chicago in excruciating fashion, blew another late lead, a game they were in control of throughout most of the night, and ultimately their season ended with a 5-game losing streak. Now, as we turn towards 2026 and trying to predict what this team will be, they've got a lot of great elements to them on both sides of the ball. They are absolutely in the discussion for being a Super Bowl contender. But the first thing that will determine all is Micah Parsons. When is he coming back, and how effective is he going to be when he does come back? Because as soon as he was out of the lineup last year, I know it was unexpected and you can't really plan for those things, that defense just fell apart. Only had 4 sacks in their final 5 games total without Parsons. Run defense fell apart. He is obviously the engine that makes this car go. And right now it sounds like he's not going to be back until what? Mid-season? Maybe a little bit later? And when he does return, will he be his normal explosive self? It takes a lot of players time to get back to feeling comfortable after coming back from a serious injury like that, especially for players who play a position like Parsons does where you rely on your explosiveness. So that'll be the thing to watch. And on top of that, the Packers traded away Rashawn Gary, who was second on the team in sacks behind Parsons. Number 3 in sacks was Devontae Wyatt, who is also coming back from a season-ending injury last year, although he figures to be ready to start at the beginning of the year. But they're going to need some other players to pick up the slack when it comes to generating a pass rush. Lucas Van Ness is going to have to step up. Free agent signing defensive tackle Javon Hargrave. He'll need to step up. The pressure's going to have to come not just off the edge. It's going to have to come through the middle. It's going to have to be generated by scheme. And their new defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, he's an interesting choice of defensive coordinator because he did a lot of unique things with the Cardinals. Can't say it worked out all that well because I think they just didn't have the talent to do so, but some of the things he did in his secondary to muddy the looks for the quarterback, I think a lot of that is how they generated pressure. They made quarterbacks hold on to the ball, and that gave their pass rush a little bit of time to get home. Again, their pressure numbers weren't great during his tenure there, but I think the Packers are probably going to have to lean on a lot of those unique looks, a lot of things to try to confuse the quarterback and make him hold the ball, because until they get Parsons back, that pass rush is going to be a major question. Now, on the other side of the ball, it's that offense that's going to have to carry them until he does get back. And look, they've got the players to be able to do that. Jordan Love is still a very, very good young quarterback. As physically gifted as a thrower as just about anyone else, I think his decision-making has improved. He does still take a lot of shots downfield, which is a great thing for creating an explosive passing game, but there are times when, again, maybe he can take some of those throws underneath a little bit more consistently to just keep the offense going so it's not as much of a splash offense or a splash passing game. But he's the real deal. His receiving core is, despite the fact that they got rid of Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks, it's really good. Christian Watson, Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed, those are 3 dynamic players. And if they can all stay on the field, which is the big question of the day, if they can stay on the field, that's going to be an explosive passing game. Not to mention you got Tucker Kraft, who was looking like Rob Gronkowski 2.0 last year, and then he tore his ACL against the Panthers in Week 9. He's already back at training camp, and he, from what we've seen, looks pretty good. Looks like there are going to be no limitations. He's going to be ready to go to start the season. But this is a Packers passing attack that can stretch the defense. They're a risk to attack you in all areas of the field. Matt LaFleur does a great job of stretching the defense horizontally. Jordan Love, Christian Watson, his receivers, they can stretch the field vertically. The one thing I wonder about this season is how is the run game going to factor in? Because Matt LaFleur, traditionally, he wants to run the ball. He wants the offense to be based off of the run game. And some people have expressed that as him being too conservative. You've probably heard a lot of comments about, are they going to take the training wheels off of Jordan Love? I don't know that the training wheels are on him. I just think he wants to major in the run game. The run game is vital to everything, from their protection to the play action they do off of it, to keeping defenses guessing. And last year, the run game did take a bit of a step back, which I think is why many Packers fans are probably a little bit sour on it, saying you got to get away from that run game a little bit more and put the ball in Jordan Love's hands a little more often. I think, look, there were offensive line issues last year, a lot of reshuffling from week to week through certain stretches due to injury and whatnot. That affects how well you're going to run the ball. That affects your desire to drop back all the time and leave your quarterback exposed when the protection isn't great. So I think this year, assuming they get less shuffling and are a little bit healthier in the offensive line, they'll be in better shape. They could have a better run game, and that'll be important because when this run game hums, the offense hums. Now, the big question is, will Josh Jacobs be playing? Or how much will he be playing? And I don't want to get into the off-the-field stuff. I know that's not what you come here for. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it will impact whether or not he's going to be in the lineup. Whatever the end result is there, it sounds like he's going to play for right now, but could be yanked off the field at any point due to the legal process taking its course, the NFL reviewing the situation and suspending him. I don't know. You don't know. And if they have to go without Josh Jacobs for any extended period of time, that's going to be detrimental to their run game and detrimental to their offense. So that's one of the big questions to watch with the Packers. Aside from all that, this is a team that is very talented, is absolutely a Super Bowl contender, should be considered that way. They are in the running for that, but they have a lot of questions. All right, the next team we're going to talk about was the third-place finisher in the NFC North last year. Many of you are probably guessing that that was the Detroit Lions, but actually it was the Minnesota Vikings who, like the Lions, were 9-8, but they won the tiebreaker because they swept the season series against Detroit. But looking back on it, you wouldn't think that they had a winning record because all the noise coming out of Minnesota was about how bad their quarterback situation was. And it was bad last year. Make no mistake, they made a calculated decision the offseason before to move on from Sam Darnold, who had a tremendous year in 2024. Kevin O'Connell did a great job of revitalizing his career. And then, of course, Darnold gets signed by the Seahawks and goes on to win the Super Bowl. The Vikings, on the other hand, they went all in on J.J. McCarthy last year. They said this is going to be a year where whatever happens, we're trying to get this guy to work. We traded up to draft him the year before. We want him to be our quarterback of the future. We thought he was going to be our quarterback of the future, and we're making the decision that, hey, we're going to live with the growing pains, and we're going to play him, and he's going to be our guy going forward. Well, 2025 was kind of a disastrous year. McCarthy dealt with a lot of injuries, did not play particularly well, did not throw with accuracy, did not make good decisions, looked like a young, immature quarterback, which was the opposite of what we all expected coming out of Michigan, the way he played in college. And overall, it just looked like the game was moving way too fast for him. So the Vikings went from a 14-3 team with one of the best quarterback performances of that season to a 9-8 team with a huge hole at the most important position. Now, I'm not going to use this time just to rip J.J. McCarthy like a lot of people do, because I think what a lot of people are missing about McCarthy is how devastating that injury was during his rookie season. In case you forgot, he tore his meniscus during the preseason of his rookie year in 2024. That knocked him out for the entire season. And even if he hadn't played a down for the Vikings in that first year of his, and Darnold played the exact same way that he did, it would have been fine because at least McCarthy would have been on the practice field. He would have been taking what he was learning in the meeting rooms and trying to apply it on the field against NFL competition, even though it was in practice. He would have been getting more up to speed and acclimated to the speed of the NFL game, would have been getting reps, would have been ironing out the kinks in his mechanics and footwork that were issues in college. But instead of doing all that, he was having surgery and rehabbing from surgery, which is tough for a quarterback to go through at any point in their career. But when you're a rookie and you don't know the NFL game, you don't know the routine of being an NFL quarterback, you don't understand or know the speed intuitively of the game, you're not used to it, that is so detrimental to your development. And then last offseason, instead of using that offseason to get stronger, faster, fill the holes that existed in his game, he was rehabbing. Again, getting back to 100% physically. So then he goes into year 2, and you've got tons of expectations because of everything Sam Darnold had done the year before and the commitment that the organization had made to McCarthy. And really, you're a rookie, but no one's viewing you as a rookie. They're saying, oh, you had 1 year. It's your second year in the league. You should be ready to go by now. And then on top of that, you get injured early on in the season. And then so McCarthy was dealing with injuries throughout the year. So I'm not making excuses for the kid. I'm just saying it's a shame that he's had to deal with these injuries. It's something that you couldn't predict ahead of time. But I think those are as responsible for his poor play when he did get on the field last year as anything. Because he did. He didn't look like a Kevin O'Connell quarterback. He didn't look like a quarterback that O'Connell had taken and been able to mold and been able to get his footwork and mechanics right so he could play within the timing of that passing game, it's a highly choreographed passing game. He didn't look like a quarterback that had been under O'Connell's tutelage at all. And I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm just saying he probably didn't spend a whole lot of time on the field, or he certainly didn't spend as much time on the field, on the practice field, that he would have if he was healthy. And that absolutely had to play a role in how much he struggled last year. But the big thing is that the Vikings decided, hey, we can't wait around anymore. We can't just sit here and wait for McCarthy to get better. We have a defense that, under Brian Flores, is ready to win now. One of the best defenses in the league every single year since Flores has been in Minnesota. He does all those complex schemes, those 6 and 7-up pressure looks that always put the offense on its heels, always limit what a passing game can do against them. So they need someone at quarterback who can play right now. They don't have time to develop. One of these days, Flores is going to move on, whether that's as a head coach or whether it's some other team scooping him up as a defensive coordinator. He's not going to be there forever. They need to take advantage while he is still there. They need to take advantage while Justin Jefferson is still in his prime and while Jordan Addison is still on the team with Justin Jefferson while he's in his prime. And it's for that reason that they can't really live through the rookie-type growing pains any longer. And that's why they went out and got Kyler Murray. Now, Kyler Murray is there in Minnesota on a deal that it's really no risk to the Vikings financially. They were able to bring him in for just the veteran minimum $1.3 million since the Cardinals are on the hook for the remainder of his contract, the other $35+ million. So on the one hand, there is no financial risk to Murray coming in, and if he doesn't play it down, whether it's due to injury or performance, it really doesn't matter to the Vikings financially. There is no risk to this move. The reality is Murray is a better player right now than McCarthy is. He is probably going to win this quarterback competition. He is probably going to be the quarterback this year, and the Vikings, I'm sure, are hoping to get some kind of revitalization out of him like they got with Sam Darnold, because Kevin O'Connell, it's not hubris. He is a quarterback whisperer. He has been very good with whoever he's had, McCarthy being the lone exception, and I think he's going to be able to get more out of Murray than we've seen the last couple of years. The interesting thing with Murray is just stylistically, he's a dual threat. He leans on his legs at times a little bit too much. That prevents him from being quite as consistent from the pocket. And why that's such a big deal is that Kevin O'Connell's passing game is heavily reliant on timing and rhythm. And that's not the type of quarterback that Kyler Murray has been. He's been the quarterback that has run around, leaned on his natural skills. He's got a very good throwing motion, a natural throwing motion. That's the baseball player in him. He's a pretty accurate passer, can make plays with his legs. He can have a bad performance where he's playing terribly or plays terribly for almost all 60 minutes, but he has 2 or 3 big plays throughout the game that kind of save the performance and help the team win. But he has not been a timing and rhythm passer, so it'll be interesting to see how those two worlds collide. Kevin O'Connell is no dummy. He knows that he's not going to be able to get Murray to play like Peyton Manning. He's going to do things like boots and rollouts that are going to get Murray on the move and out of the pocket and play to his strengths, but he's also going to, I think, try to find ways to expand what he can do from the pocket, try to get Murray to play with a little more timing and rhythm, just like he got Darnold to play that way in 2024. And I think he will have the ability to improve that element of his game, just because that's O'Connell's track record. But that's the issue with Kyler Murray, and that's always been the issue, is he's a streaky player both within games and within seasons. He's had several years where first 6 or 7 games of the year, you're like, this guy is on his way to becoming the next Lamar Jackson. He's going to be a consistent MVP threat. And then he'll go into the tank for the next 6 games. And more recently, he's gotten injured. He's missed a lot of time over the last 3 or 4 years. So those are the things to watch with the Vikings. Murray is very likely going to win the job. If he doesn't win the job because J.J. McCarthy outplays him in the preseason, that's actually a really good thing for the Vikings, because that will mean he would have improved substantially to be able to earn that job. But again, I think it is going to be Murray. Defensively, I don't have many concerns with the Vikings. I mean, Brian Flores' defense is always, like I said, one of the best. Defending the pass, defending the run. Last year, they fell off a little bit defending the run, so they went out and addressed that during the draft. They used 2 of their first 3 picks on defensive tackles. They took Caleb Banks with the 18th overall pick and Dominique Orange in the 3rd round. Both those players were brought in for their ability to stuff the run. It'll be interesting to see when both those players crack the starting lineup. I'm sure the Vikings want to get them on the field as soon as possible and as much as possible. Obviously, we'll wait and see what happens with Caleb Banks. He broke his foot last year, missed most of the 2025 season in college, and then re-injured that foot at the Combine. But either way, the Vikings are hoping they can make an impact on their run defense immediately when they do play. And if that happens, offenses are not going to have a lot of options for finding ways to move the ball against that Vikings defense. And if that's the case, and you get Kyler Murray having a bounce-back year under O'Connell, throwing to guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Juwan Jennings, we might just see another season similar to 2024 when they had Sam Darnold at quarterback. The last team, but certainly not the least, in our NFC North 2026 preview is the Detroit Lions. The Lions also finished 9-8 like the Vikings. Again, more proof that this was the best division in football last year and probably will be again in 2026. But the Lions, they took a big step back last year, going from 15-2 and the number 1 seed the year before to just 9-8, so a 6-game drop-off. They were still a very good team. And I still think heading into this season that they have to be considered one of the best in the NFC. They still have Jared Goff, still have Jahmyr Gibbs, Jameson Williams, a lot of explosive players on offense, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta. On defense, Aiden Hutchinson. The issues last year with the Lions came down to 3 things in my opinion. 1, they had turnover at both offensive and defensive coordinator. And it wasn't just that they changed both of their coordinators. It was that they lost 2 very good play designers and play callers on both sides of the ball. Ben Johnson, obviously, we talked about him earlier. He moved on to the Bears. Aaron Glenn, I know he struggled in his first year as Jets head coach. He was as instrumental as anyone in the Lions organization in turning that franchise around because he was a very good defensive play caller, very good defensive coordinator. At times, they won games because of the scheme that he deployed in that particular game. So you lose 2 coordinators like that, you, of course, are going to have issues. On the offensive side of the ball, Dan Campbell brought in John Morton from the Denver Broncos. Didn't like the job he was doing midway through the year and took over play calling duties, then fired him at the end of the year. So that was one issue, was the offensive consistency. Even though it was really good, Jared Goff had a really good year. Jahmyr Gibbs had a really good year. They weren't quite the same. They had more moments where they just kind of didn't show up. And then on the defensive side of the ball, even though I think Kelvin Shepard did a good job at times, it was still different, still an adjustment. Everyone calls the game differently. Everyone does different things in different situations, and that probably played a role. I'd say the number 2 reason why the Lions didn't do as well last year was because of their offensive line. Despite the skilled players they have, which are tremendous in so many different places on the offensive side of the ball, their offensive line is really what set them apart in previous years. And entering last year, we knew that that might be a little bit of an issue because on the interior, they had 3 new players in 3 different positions. First, center Frank Ragnow retired. Right guard Kevin Zeitler then moved on in free agency, both of which were instrumental in the Lions' run game. And so the Lions filled those holes with Graham Glasnow moving from left guard to center, Christian Mahogany moving from the bench to left guard, and then rookie Tate Ratledge taking over at right guard. So that's, again, 3 positions manned by 3 new players inside. So, of course, it's going to be different communication, different levels of success, different levels of ability to reestablish the line of scrimmage in the run game, to make the right calls and make the right blocks and make effective blocks. And the run game took a little bit of a step back last year as a result. They went from the number 6 run game the year before to the number 14 run game. They had more negative runs, fewer big plays. And that, I think, as much as anything, played a role in the offense just not being as consistent. Not to mention, you had Jared Goff, who is more or less a statue in the pocket. He needs time and space, particularly space directly in front of him, and he didn't quite have that with the Lions' interior not being quite as stout. And again, didn't prevent him from having a great year. He still had a really good season, but I think there were a couple performances here or there that were probably impacted by pressure. and there was just a little bit less consistency to his game. I'm nitpicking here because he did have such a good year, but these are the types of things that lead to a team going from 15-2 to 9-8, is just not operating on all cylinders to quite the same degree. And then finally, the biggest issue for them was injuries. Their defense, everyone thought the year before, oh, no way the Lions could be as banged up as they were on defense the year before. Because when they were 15-2, the only thing that kept them from a Super Bowl run was the fact that they lost so many players towards the end of the year on defense in almost a comical way, is how bad it was. They were signing guys off the street and putting in the games to start, and eventually it caught up with them in the playoffs. Well, last year, it was even worse, technically, in terms of games missed. Defense was really banged up again, and that led to them just not quite turning the corner, not being an elite unit, not really being a top half of the league unit. Lions finished the year 22nd in points allowed, 18th in yards allowed, and again, I think that was a result of all the injuries they faced. Unfortunately, heading into 2026, they're kind of starting off on the same foot because some of the players that got hurt last year, they got hurt late in the season with serious injuries, so they're not going to be back until later this season. For instance, safety Brian Branch, who's been one of the best safeties in football since entering the league in 2023, he ruptured his Achilles back in December of last year. That means he won't be back until late this season, if at all. And once he is back, this is the question I always have with the injuries. Don't just look at the date that players come back. Are they going to be as effective when they first come back? Everyone takes some time to get used to coming back from a serious injury, so you can't just count on a guy stepping into the lineup and not missing a beat from the last time he played. They also have an issue with safety Kirby Joseph, who has lingering issues with his knee, forced him to miss 11 games last year, and it seems like it's an issue that he's just going to have to continue to deal with, and who knows if he'll be ready for week one. Who knows when he'll play, how much he'll play. It's a concern on the back end for the Lions. It really is. And then aside from injuries, it certainly didn't help that the Lions recently had to cut cornerback Terrion Arnold for some alleged off-the-field foolishness. So it's going to come down to Aiden Hutchinson, I don't want to say being a one-man show, but finding ways to get pressure on the quarterback and having that cascade all the way down through the defense. And then it's going to come down to Kelvin Shepard doing some things schematically to keep the Lions in games, to keep that defense going, to force the offense to be on their heels mentally and slow down their processing and decision-making. On the offensive side of the ball, those issues we talked about, offensive coordinator and offensive line, I think they've been sufficiently addressed. Up front, the Lions will have 3 new players at 3 new positions, although I think this will be a bit of a welcome change versus the year before where they were going from one of the best offensive lines to somewhat of the unknown. I think last year when you struggle, and now this year you have 3 new faces, it's more of a welcome thing. But the big change is Penei Sewell going from right tackle to left tackle. He's one of the best, if not the best tackles in football in general, so I don't have a ton of concerns with him going from one side to the other. The Lions also used their 17th overall pick on Blake Miller to play right tackle. They signed Cade Mays away from the Panthers to play center. So it'll still be a question. We still need to find out what exactly they'll be on offense, how good that offensive line will be. But I do think they want to use the run game as the foundation of their offense, do what they did with Ben Johnson, where even though they spread it out and they threw the ball a ton, have some really good intricate run concepts, do a good job within the run game of keeping the defense off balance. I think they did that by signing Drew Petzing to be their offensive coordinator. He comes from Arizona. He was the Cardinals' offensive coordinator for 3 years, and he really was someone who majored more in the run game. That's where he had a lot of success. In 2023, the Cardinals ranked 4th in rushing yards, 2nd in yards per attempt, and 3rd in runs of 10 yards or more. 2024, they were 7th, 2nd, and 4th in those categories, respectively. Last year, everything kind of fell apart in Arizona because they lost their top 2 running backs for the season by week 4. Kyler Murray, who factored into the run game as a quarterback, he was done after week 5. So not sure how much you can blame Petzing for the wheels falling off. What I will say is that Petzing relied more on gap scheme runs than the Lions have used in the last few years. He was near the top of the league in terms of gap scheme frequency. And so it'll be interesting to see if Dan Campbell chooses to utilize more gap schemes. That's the type of run you want to use when you are trying to be more physical, get better angles on the defense. It's runs like duo, power, counter, where you're getting pulling guards, you're getting down blocks. And it's not that the Lions never utilized these runs before. They've used plenty of duo, plenty of power, plenty of counter. They've been a physical running team. They've been one of the most physical offenses in the league, really up until last year. And so maybe this is Dan Campbell just doubling down on the physical element of the run game, or maybe he thinks, look, our offensive line, they just naturally aren't as good as they were a couple years ago at being physical. Maybe utilizing these gap scheme runs will put us in position to be more physical based on our angles, based on the down blocks, based on the scheme itself. Either way, just like with any of the other teams in this division, there is not a lot of margin for error. So the Lions are going to have to get that offensive line and that run game going as soon as possible, and they're going to have to iron out all those issues in the back end of their defense. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. As always, if you like this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Check out footballfilmroom.com. We've got individual breakdowns on every single team heading into the 2026 season. Next week, our previews continue with the AFC North. We'll talk Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, Browns. But I think that's all I've got for you today, and I'll talk to you next time.